Welcome, everybody. I'm going to take my glasses off because this is a serious conversation. And you know that I'm here to take notes and pay attention because we have in the house the amazing Debra Jastrow. I hope I pronounced that correctly, with Tatum Insurance. And the reason that she's here today is because my event professionals across the United States have been running into venues and properties that are requesting different than normal certificates of insurance. And what I mean by that is CB, that's, before COVID, BC, before COVID, they used to ask for a certificate of insurance and they were usually looking for maybe 1 million to 2 million. And Debra's going to explain all of this for those of you who are novices and why you need it and what you need and what you don't need and all that. But we're accustomed to that. And if you're a professional DJ, the American Disc Jockey Association can offer you some insurance options. But for all the other event professionals in event ensemble and across the United States that don't have an association, they need a professional insurance agent or brokerage like Tatum Insurance who can help you to manage this. I happen to know for a fact that the Ritz-Carlton will not allow you to come on their property without insurance. And you have to provide that documentation in advance, and then you have to prove it again before they let you set up your DJ equipment or your photo booth or whatever it is that you're doing in advance of getting on the property. You have to pass through their security, and the first thing they ask you is, where's your certificate of insurance? Okay, but what's changed is that they're asking for more than just that. And the values that they're asking for have bumped up exceedingly. So they're not looking for 1 to 2 million, but they're looking for 3 to 5. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, we got to talk about this. In addition to that, they're asking for some other things that I'm seeing now the glasses go on because I need to read my notes, that are different than what we've been accustomed to in the past. They're asking that you provide general liability. They want to know about property insurance, physical insurance, financial insurance, and they're even asking for your employees. Help me out here, Debra. I know you're going to jump in here.
Workers' compensation.
Thank you. Workers' compensation for your employees. That, and then they want an umbrella policy. I mean, the list just goes on and on. It's almost usurious. Is that the right word? Anyway, it's excessive. So let's back up now that I've had my rant, and let's talk about insurance for event professionals. Debra.
Okay, so I can start with the general liability and asking them for certificates. That's actually normal. The certificates of liability you guys were presenting before is general liability. The standard across the board is 1 million, 2 million. However, after COVID, now I would say that's what, AC after COVID, things are changing. They're requiring a little bit more coverage, I think mostly just to cover themselves. And that could be in the form of higher liability limits. So they usually do them in different sections. There could be 1 million, 2 million, 1 million, 3 million. There could be a 2 million, 4 million. Some companies, depending on who you go to, may offer even higher or require an umbrella, which is another additional coverage limit on top of the general liability, and it will bump up your limits to what they need.
Okay, but that's a lot. So as the guy who talks to DJs all the time and manages a group of over 1,000 event professionals here in Arizona, the group is called Event Ensemble. I get requests all the time for where do I get insurance for an event that is this weekend? And of course, inside voice going, what are you freaking crazy? Sorry. And then my friendly voice says, you should call Debra. The idea that you should buy insurance for just the one day, I would think that the 1 day policy, for that, you might as well just get it for the year.
Agreed. Typical 1 day events that I've seen, minimum start off at $125. Realistically, getting one, if you're just looking for full year general liability, could be $300, $400, $500 a year. And it will do all the events that you go to. And it will include the specialized wording, depending on what that wording is, built in with that. So that way the burden is taken off of you and you provide that coverage, and then burden is no longer on the companies like the Ritz-Carlton. Now, if you make a mistake, your policy pays and not their policy. And that's really what they're looking for. And it's just better to have a year policy and issue out a certificate versus hunting down event insurance for every single event.
Okay, So once again, we agree. And by the way, talk about peace of mind. I mean, when I go out and do my thing and spin and jump and dance and play music and all that stuff, my wife sleeps good at night, knowing that we are covered, that we have
Mhm.
insurance. And it's not just insurance for the one property or the two properties a year that ask for insurance. It's for all of my events, which again gives us peace of mind. Just for clarification, what typically is requested from the property, they refer to it as, they want to be named as an additionally insured. So your verbiage that you're talking about is more than just that additionally insured. It's what they're requesting, correct? Because they may have
Correct.
some overarching, in other words, we know it as the Ritz-Carlton, but they have an organization or help me out. It's not LLC, it's bigger.
It is a legal standpoint. I think they're trying to make sure that they're covered. And it's actually, the wording is not additionally insured. That's a common misconception. It's
Oh,
additional insured.
ah,
So yes, they're asking for that. Basically, the best way I can put it is give the example of a general contractor hires an electrician. The electrician comes to the house. The general contractor oversees the entire project. He says, look, if you make a mistake, I want your policy to pay first, not mine. So I need you to list me as an additional insured. It means your policy comes first, and if needed, then mine comes. It's the same with the Ritz-Carlton and anybody else that requires it. They just want you to pay for your mistakes, not them. That's why they ask for those things.
okay. Thanks for this great promotion for the Ritz-Carlton. Just to be clear, it's not just them, whether
Yeah.
it's the Hilton, the Hyatt, the Sheraton, or the local country club, and even banquet halls. So it doesn't matter what the name of the property is. If they're requesting it, they're requesting it. And just to be clear, and help me if I'm right or wrong, your homeowner's insurance is not going to do this.
No, your home covers your home. Business should be business. Those should always be separate. Never, ever combine business and personal, ever.
Okay. And would it be confusing if you had other business insurance? Like, let's say that I owned a building and I had insurance for that building. That still is not going to cover the event purpose
No.
of insurance, correct?
Correct. So there's different types. So you own a building, that's technically like a lesser's risk. So totally different building owner. There's different levels of liability, different types of liability. For the liability that you're going to expose those places to is the coverage you need to have for that exposure. So if you're a caterer, you owning a building is not going to help. If you are a DJ but also run a dental office, your dental office is not going to help you when you're going to an event.
Okay, perfect. You mentioned caterer, and there are lots of caterers in event ensemble. We had a bartender who is no longer part of the group. And he's probably, of the 1,000+ members, he's probably one of 4 that I actually had to say, go away, which is a pretty good number considering if there was only 4 out of that many that we had to say go away. But he wouldn't, he's a bartender, and he would not get insurance. And I can't fathom somebody giving you, whether it's alcohol or food that you're going to consume. And this is all even before COVID. I mean, people get sick from food poisoning. How could you not have insurance? Yes, no?
Agreed. And why do you run a business if you're not willing to protect it, especially if it's required by, I don't know, the state or any place that you want to do business with?
Okay, so you mentioned the state. So let's talk about that. Besides me being in a state of confusion or a state of denial, what about people who are in other states, whether it be California, Nevada, New York, New Mexico, and everywhere in between?
Well, it depends. Do you just do business in that state? Do you do business multi-state? Can open up a can of worms. Theoretically, whatever state you're working in, that's the state you should have insurance in. Some might allow you to go multi-state, but that's another conversation, that's a more in-depth conversation that I can say on there. If you're whatever state you're working in, that's probably the state you should have the coverage in. So that way, any event you do anywhere in that state, it's covered. You don't want to start crossing lines because underwriting guidelines and rules and regulations are different per state. Some are way more strict, California, than our other states, say Arizona, Nevada, maybe New Mexico.
Okay, so my car insurance, if I drive across state lines, I'm covered. But if I live in Arizona and my policy is for Arizona, it's not going to cover me for California?
It's a question you would ask underwriting. So that's something you would get a pre-approval on. Is it okay if I go do an event here? since I don't know specifically what your policy says, I'm not going to answer that for you, but I would say you would ask an underwriter on there. So
Okay.
if your agent says, yes, you can do all those things and you're not sure if you can, maybe say, agent of mine, please double check that that's okay, so that I am covered in the event something like that happens.
It's like those good folks in compliance.
A big part of my job too is making sure I'm in compliance, because if I don't, then my insurance has to pay for your insurance, and then I get in a lot more trouble. And I'd rather have my insurance stay intact.
Well, we don't want you to get in trouble. But you took my state question the wrong way, because you were thinking about people performing in different states. I was referring to, if I refer you to somebody who's in New York, can you write a policy for them?
So it depends. We're licensed in 22 different states. Me specifically in our office, I'm licensed in California, Texas, and another state that I don't recall, but I signed up for that person.
I don't
I am
recognize the
required.
state if I don't recall.
I don't recall what it is. It was somebody that was a good referral from a very good friend of mine, and it was easy for me to get a license there to do insurance for them. I want to say now it's Wisconsin, now that I'm thinking about it, but because it was somebody that meant a lot to me, it was easy for me to get a license. So yes, you need to be licensed in every state that you do business in.
Okay. What is a spot policy?
Spot policy. I can't say that I've heard of that one.
Okay, then we're going to move on. What's an umbrella? And
An
why
umbrella?
why would I want one, or do I need one? And
So,
when I say I mean event people.
Right. Well, it all depends. What are you required to provide? If it's going to 5 million and up, most business owner policies, which I imagine, given what you're telling me, the audience, that they would fall under a business policy. An umbrella goes over and above that. Just think of like an umbrella over your home, your auto. It protects everything underneath that. So most of the time, umbrellas will go over the general liability to expand and give you more coverage. So instead of it being 1 million, 2 million, if you get an umbrella, it would bump it up another million. It can be extended to go over, say, workers' compensation or a commercial auto. Those things you have to get approval on and send other paperwork in. Easy stuff I can do, but realistically, they're looking for the liability side of the thing. So that's where you can expand it on.
You mentioned vehicle, and so I'm going to totally open up a can of worms here.
Sure.
If I'm mom and pop shop and I'm a photo booth and I'm running my business out of my Jeep or whatever, or my minivan, is it commercial, or is it, what's the other one?
So it's difficult.
It is difficult.
It could be both. It depends on how often you drive, right? You're driving maybe 1 to 2 times a week. You're driving 1 to 2 times a day. That's the amount that you use your vehicle, and how often and what you're using it for. Sometimes I'll give the example, me as an agent, I don't necessarily need a commercial policy, but I have my vehicle listed as business use. Why? Because I visit clients, I go to clients, I help them with their insurance, and I'll visit them at their location. So it could be the same with you. It's a fine line. And again, it needs to be run through underwriting to see where you fall in. But more often than not, if you're not driving a whole lot for your events, like 2 or 3 a day, then you could use it as business use. It is a charge on there, but if you get into an accident and they say, oh, I was on my way to a job, a claims adjuster, if they want to, could say you were using it for business and you're not covered for business, therefore no coverage for you. So it always depends. You assess each situation. I'm not going to make it fall under it. And it depends on how the vehicle is titled as well. I just really remember that. If it's titled in the business, it's a commercial
it's definitely
policy.
Commercial, right?
Yes.
That part I get. And because I remember the old days of California, when I had a business vehicle that had a special plate, it meant that you could park in loading and unloading zones legally because of the plate, but you had to have the commercial insurance on it. So there's just a little piece of stuff. So we've touched on workman's comp a couple of times. Why would the property request that? And if I'm a solopreneur, or if I bring, like it's me and I have an assistant or something, help me out here.
So workers' compensation covers injuries on the job. And whether you're 1099 or not, if you get hurt, and I'll continue with the Ritz-Carlton, you get hurt there, you're 1099, you're not an employee, they don't care. The auditor could deem it, and Ritz-Carlton will probably pay out under your work comp policy. Why? Because they hired you for that job. So workers' compensation, again, covers you and your employees. The hard part is being a solopreneur, right? More often than not, owners try not to include themselves because work comp is solely based on payroll and whatever your risk is on there. They have specific codes that they use. So if it's just you and you're not wanting to worry about how much it is to have your payroll on there, you can do what's called a ghost policy. Basically, it's a policy you pay for that does absolutely nothing except for provide you a policy number for the Ritz-Carlton. It's terrible. I don't recommend them, but sometimes you can't get out of it. If you have an employee, you could put the coverage on the employee and exclude yourself, or you can include yourself. Arizona allows you to do those two things. And sometimes ghost policies aren't the easiest to find, but they are definitely out there and can be written, but they suck, for lack of a better term.
You don't recommend them because essentially they cost me as the end user money, and they provide me with no protection.
No, absolutely nothing.
Okay, very good. It's like one of those null and void things.
Right.
Hold harmless. We didn't talk about that. What is that all about?
Oh, hold harmless agreements. Those are it's
Do I
hard
need
for me
an
to
attorney,
explain
or
on
is it
there.
still insurance?
I mean, I'd probably go the attorney side of things. It depends. It's all about the contract language in there. So having the hold harmless agreements on there, I would say that's a subject we can talk about at another time. That's a whole can of worms that would take a much longer time to talk about.
Okay, but is that something that I want to discuss with my attorney, or is it my insurance person, or both?
A little bit of both. It depends on what's in the contract, right? I can't read contract language. I'm not a lawyer. I can look and tell you what I kind of think is in there, but in the end, lawyers can best interpret that because it's a fine line you're crossing on there on how much are you going to be held harmless, or how much is it the liability going to be removed from you? Again, lawyers and reviewing that, and then me seeing a copy of the contract and always running it through underwriting to make sure it's within the acceptable language for them. So yeah, that's what I can say on that.
Okay, so what did I miss? I mean, we covered the additional insured. Is there a fee? I mean, it's like if I'm working once a week, every Saturday in the year, and I need additional insured for each property or for each event, each weekend, is there a charge or a fee from Tatum Insurance for that?
So for me, when I know that it's people that do things like catering or wedding and events, I know that it's not few and far between that you do events. I know it's quite often. So I like to do what's called a blanket additional insured endorsement. It allows me to issue certificates just like an auto certificate, like print it out, send it, mark the specific wording that they want on there, and you can have it. If I don't, it could be anywhere from $25 to $500 for an additional insured. Now, the 500 is going to be for like the contractors and a lot bigger type, higher risk, but typically $25 it would be per. So why not blanket it for maybe $100 a year? Then 5 events in, it's already paid for itself, and you don't have to wait for me to send it in, get approval, get it back. It could be a 24-hour turnaround, and that's frustrating when it's built into there and it's a 5-minute turnaround. 5 is a lot easier than 24 hours.
It is, because in this industry, I can't tell you how many times I get a call when I'm in the driveway and they're like, DJ didn't show, or the caterer is not here, and can you get here? And the property is going to request that documentation, and you need to be able to turn it around fast. Well,
Yeah.
This has been informative. And I
Can I throw out one more point? Okay.
I'm just about to ask.
Sorry, not
Go
that I want
ahead.
to. On the additional insured, when you need that certificate holders, again, Ritz-Carlton, I will always need the name and the address that needs to be listed on the certificate. So just a name's not going to help. And if they need to be additional insured, you got to let us know on there, because more often than not, we won't mark it. We only mark it if it's required by contract. So just always remember full name and address. Why? Because they'll send it back to you and say, I need all of this. And you'll say, well, I didn't know I needed all that. So just get it right away, because it will always need to be listed on the certificate for them.
And I will also add that just because it's the Ritz, and again, we're using Ritz as the example, just because you know it as the property of Ritz-Carlton in that address does not mean that that's what they want listed as the additional insured, but it may be some other corporation or organization that they want to be named. And you need to know what that is.
Absolutely. Just like your mortgage company, it always has a different address that you need for your mortgagee clause versus where you send your payment versus where you get proof of something else. There's always different addresses, like your lien holders, all of that. So just get that information. Makes it a lot easier for both of us.
Because it would be double work, I assume, because if you do it for the wrong address, then you got to do it all over again.
Right. Or say, what if I randomly got pulled into a meeting and then I'm in there for 2 hours and you have to wait for 2 hours? I don't want that to happen to you. If we can it's best to measure twice and cut once.
Well,
I should say.
There goes the 5-minute.
Right.
But the measure twice and cut once is truly on point. Thank you so much. But again, I've thrown a lot at you. Is there anything else you can think of that we need to know that can cover our Jastrow?
Sure. What I want to say is nobody's the same. You might be in the same business, but your business is never the same as somebody else. So if somebody says, I only have this, or I only pay this, never ever just go by what somebody else says on there. So many factors that you don't even know about are taken into consideration when it comes to your insurance contractor. So always talk to a professional. In fact, talk to a professional that has options. Why? Because then they're not out for themselves, they're out for you, and they'll shop it for you until they find the best coverage for you because they have the options. And that's what I can say is keep your options open.
Okay, I'm getting long-winded, but you keep bringing up a great topic for me. There's a difference between a captivated agent and an independent. Is that the word, independent?
Yes. So
okay.
yes.
And you are independent?
Yes. So
Okay.
captive means they only represent like one company, say State Farm or Allstate Farm Bureau. Those are all captive, meaning they only write for those. Geico is another one of those. Independent agents are allowed to represent several different companies. And I can also say this, the insurance industry is so extremely heavily regulated that maybe you might not have heard of the insurance company that say I quote you through, but we only work with AM Best rated A companies, and they have to go through a very rigorous process in order to be a good agency, in order to be a good company, to get the ratings that they do. So we don't do fly by the seat of our pants type insurance companies, and the insurance companies I work for don't cater to you. They cater to me because I write the business and I know the business. So even if you haven't heard of them, doesn't mean it's not a good company. You have to know what the agency is and what type of business they write. So always go for the best of the best because they'll find you the best.
Wow, so on point. And addressing the professional in the conversation truly makes a difference. If you go to an agent who's not versed in what the needs are, then you can find yourself buying a great policy because it was really reasonable. And man, did I save a ton of money. Oh, but it doesn't cover that. It doesn't, but what happens? And I'm not, right? And that's the problem.
That's right. When people tell you I got the cheapest policy around there and I find out it doesn't cover everything, I feel like that's not very cheap. And I never use the word cheap.
Yeah, well, and you may not need to have everything covered, but you'll never know what you need covered and what not unless you're really speaking to a professional agent who's familiar with the industry.
Absolutely. And the one last thing I can say on there is you always got to be detailed. Underwriters love your story. And if we don't have your whole story, I might not have you insured correctly. I definitely have a future prospect I'm working on who has the cheapest policy around that actually covers absolutely nothing that he does. So details, tell me what you do. And I can find you the right one because there's a lot of different ways to classify people. And if you're classified incorrectly, then you're paying a whole lot of money for nothing, even if it is cheap.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes helping to educate us on insurance. And we're going to be very excited to welcome you to Event Ensemble.
Thank you, Scott. I very much appreciate your time.